I'll start with the important part. There is currently no direct evidence of sexual crimes committed by Bill or Hillary Clinton, and the Clintons themselves deny everything. The girls from the Epstein case spoke in detail about princes, billionaires, and media moguls, but there are no specific court-confirmed testimonies about the Clintons yet. Like, I saw Clinton doing X in room Y. Former President Mr. Bill Clinton, the man who sat in the Oval Office, is now forced under oath to explain why he flew dozens of times on the plane of a man recognized as a sexual predator. His wife, one of the most influential women in the world, says, "I never met him at all." Epstein, not her husband, she met her husband a couple of times. Can you believe that? Today we'll talk about Bill and Hillary, about their relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, about what they say, and about what's in this story. Well, it just doesn't add up no matter how you look at it. To begin with, here are a couple of points for those who came to America as adults and didn't really follow its internal affairs. Bill Clinton, President of the United States from 1993 to 2001, a man who lived through the immigration boom of the 90s Yugoslavia, the bombings of Yugoslavia. We know why he did it. They bombed Yugoslavia. Monica Lewinsky comes to mind, so Monica Gate, or rather what we call impeachment. Hillary Clinton was first the First Lady, then a senator, then Secretary of State under Obama, and a candidate for president in 2016. For those who lived in the USSR, imagine a mix of the General Secretary, a member of the Politburo, and the wife of a regional party secretary who later became a secretary herself. Not just an ordinary family, a clan that has been at the very top of power for decades, and now this clan has to explain to us who we even are. Riffraff, lowlifes, rednecks, very unpleasant things. Relationships with a person named Jeffrey Epstein, a man who was officially accused of creating a network of sexual exploitation of minors. Okay, yes, a man who died in prison so conveniently that half of America still doesn't believe it was a suicide. So let's first calmly, as investigators should, lay out the facts that no one disputes anymore. Epstein visited the Clinton White House, according to documents, not just once or twice, but 17 times. What was Epstein doing in the White House 17 times during President Bill's term? Second, after Clinton left the presidency, their contact didn't end. On the contrary, joint flights on Epstein's planes began. Clinton's own office admits to 4 trips on Epstein's plane in 2002-2003, but journalists and published flight logs, that is, the flight records, show at least 17 trips. And so, in these trips, there were 26 or 27 flights, meaning there could be 1 trip but 2 flights. Routes included Europe, Asia, Africa, humanitarian tours, conferences, and Clinton Foundation events. So Clinton couldn't use anyone else's plane, right? Only Jeffrey Epstein's. And Epstein never met Hillary, never met him. These trips involved not only Bill and Epstein. On some flights, for example, actor Kevin Spacey and comedian Chris Tucker traveled with them. There was a very well-known trip to Africa in 2002 connected with projects to fight AIDS. The BBC separately describes how Ghislaine Maxwell actually introduced Epstein to the Clintons, first through social events and then through trips. The foundation, that is, saying that it was a random acquaintance, as Bill says, is, to put it mildly, strange. Numerous visits, dozens of flights, joint events. These are systematic relationships, not one-time hello-goodbye encounters. And now let's see what the Clintons themselves have to say. Even now, under oath during congressional hearings, Hillary, in her closed-door testimony and subsequent comments, she literally says the following: "I have never met Jeffrey Epstein. Well, never. I have never been to his island, never been to his houses. I have no connection to his affairs. And I was invited here to court, supposedly just for a political show, because my last name is Clinton, not because I have any information. That's all. I don't know anything else." So her position is complete distancing. I don't know him at all. Bill has a slightly different position. So is it pointless to deny knowing each other? In his official oral statement, he says something like this. Yes, I knew Epstein. It was a brief acquaintance in the early 2000s. Well, he visited me at the White House 17 times, that's true, and then I flew 17 times. For every visit to the White House, there was one flight on the plane. So was all of this connected to charitable initiatives? Yes, I flew on his planes for foundation business, but all the trips were within the scope of public activities. But I didn't know about his crimes. I didn't see any illegal behavior. If I had known, I would have turned him into the police or somewhere else directly. The question is if he has ever visited Little St. James Island. Well, that's the one where, according to the so-called victims, some of the abuse took place, not just the sexual acts. And he answered no, he had never been there. So on paper, everything sounds very neat. He says, I didn't see him, I didn't hear him, I didn't know. He flew, but only as a philanthropist, he didn't notice anything criminal. He kept looking left and right and didn't notice anything. Something doesn't add up, like it just doesn't make sense. Let's turn on that very sense that we've trained so well when a person says something formally correct, but you feel it intuitively. Somewhere here they're taking us for fools. Usually somewhere here or everywhere they're taking us for fools. Here are a few points, to put it mildly, where questions arise. Let's start with the first brief acquaintance. Let's define a brief acquaintance. If a person visited the White House 17 times to see Bill Clinton, and after that, when his presidency ended, you flew 17 times on his plane, traveled together to Africa with actors and other guests, can you really call that a brief acquaintance? That's quite a talent for choosing words. We'd usually call that person a good acquaintance, nearly a family friend. Now he saw nothing, knew nothing, heard nothing, felt nothing. That's Bill's official line. I didn't know about Epstein's crimes. I only saw him as a philanthropist. Well, technically that's possible, of course, but there's a little nuance. There had been rumors about Epstein for many years, long before the high-profile arrests. The president of the country is always briefed on who he's supposed to meet with, and they always dig up everything possible. In 1936, he once spoke on the same platform with the head of the Ku Klux Klan, although he didn't support him. But just in case and so on, Epstein's lifestyle wasn't just discussed. It was the talk of the town, to put it mildly, widely known in certain circles. Models, very young girls, lavish parties, Russian girls, also very young. For Bill Clinton to be moving in these circles, flying on that plane and not hearing anything, not noticing anything, not knowing anything at all, you'd have to either be incredibly blind, and Bill is not a blind man, or have an unbelievable ability to filter out reality itself. I think that's exactly what we're talking about right now. I'm not saying right now that he participated, or what he did, or that he saw what was happening. I'm not even talking about that, although I do have my suspicions. Oh, I have suspicions. Yes, I'm saying that's one version. I didn't know anything at all and couldn't have guessed. It sounds, let's say, very convenient for a lawyer. But what do the girls actually say? The girls who are called Epstein's victims. Although I have a different opinion about many of them, but that's not important. Epstein's victims, in various cases, they talked about politicians, princes, billionaires, scientists, named names, described scenes, islands, houses, airplanes. There were also statements in the press that Clinton likes them younger and could have visited the island. But specific court-confirmed testimonies like I saw Clinton or I was involved with Clinton and so on have not been publicly confirmed. Although we have a bunch of photos, we don't know, of a completely or half-naked Clinton lying next to very young girls in a jacuzzi. Again, we have no idea, the water isn't clear, and whether they are completely or not completely, or maybe some are and some aren't, who knows. So, honestly, it's fair to say that Bill's connection with Epstein is documented and detailed. Flights, visits, events. His involvement in specific sexual crimes has not been proven as of now, and he categorically denies it. After Monica Lewinsky. Of course, that's cool, yes, but the nature of the connections and the scale of the contacts make the official version. I didn't see anything. I thought he was just a philanthropist. Extremely doubtful. Still, if you have even a little bit of experience living in the real world, then yeah, right. Kevin Spacey was involved in that very African trip where he, Clinton, and Tucker flew on Epstein's plane. Spacey himself talks more about his own accusations and scandals in public interviews, and he tries to, minimize his connection with Epstein and Clinton. He doesn't have any sensational, detailed stories about what happened on board, and honestly, that's not surprising considering the actor's own legal situation, which isn't very good. On those flights, he says there were young girls, young women. What young girls means isn't very clear, but when people say that, they usually mean young girls. My colleagues and I asked, he says, who is this guy Epstein and why is he putting the president in a risky position? And how is he putting the president in a risky position? Probably with the help of young girls. I didn't want to be around, says Spacey, this man, because I felt that he was putting the president at risk by what was going on around him. These girls, let me remind you, they are young girls. So here we have a classic picture. A lot of strange coincidences, multiple contacts, a tight-knit group, but each participant officially says, I didn't see anything. I don't know anything. I thought it was all exclusively for humanitarian purposes. Back in the USSR, we knew perfectly well how the elite was organized. Regional committee secretaries, ministers, generals, they had their own health resorts, closed stores, hunting, fishing, special distribution centers. Officially, none of them knew anything about caviar, cognac, or special rations. We weren't even supposed to know about the special rations. The American elite is in no fundamental way, any different. Instead of a hunting lodge, there's a private island. Instead of a special distribution center, a private jet. Instead of a party supply agent, a financier who can solve problems and donate a couple of million to an election or $1 million to a fund. The only difference is that in the USSR, we called it connections, while here it's called fundraising or networking. If you don't know these words, learn them. You can't get far without them. So when people tell us, yes, we knew each other, but it was by chance, and yes, he visited us, but it was for official business. Yes, we flew together, but we only talked about charity and never mentioned the half-naked or naked young girls who ran past us. We all know what this is, ladies and gentlemen. This is called damage control. Admit the most obvious things and deny everything else. Zhvanetsky had a great joke about this. What's that on your shoulder? And then, when he found out a crane had fallen, he immediately said it was just a towel. Yes, that's damage control. Something's not being said here. Let's be honest, I won't say that Bill was involved in crimes, although I'd bet 99-1. No, actually, I'd bet 100-0 I don't have any facts that the courts and investigators don't have. But here's what I can say for sure. When a former U.S. president describes dozens of flights, visits to the White House, and trips together as just a brief acquaintance, we're not being told the whole story. When someone who has been surrounded by rumors for years says, I only saw a philanthropist and never heard anything about the girls, we're not being told the whole story here either. When this man's wife says, I never met him at all. Even though Bill flew on the billionaire's plane dozens of times, we're not being told the whole story here. Well, at the very least, about the level of awareness in the family. And this is Hillary, who knew about all of Bill's mistresses and victims, because Bill definitely had victims. When this whole circle of politicians, actors, princes, professors, all repeat the same mantra together. I was there, I didn't see anything, I honestly thought it was just a party. They're not telling us a lot here. We're basically living in an invisible kindergarten. We understand how the elites operate, how it works. Covered it up, didn't see, didn't know. Even if we don't have visible evidence, we have the right to ask questions. Who exactly invited Epstein to the White House 17 times? Who approved the routes, the trips, the passenger list for more than 20 flights? What did the Secret Service agents who accompanied all this say, or maybe they weren't allowed on board? Why do so many people connected to this case end up suddenly dead or claim they don't remember anything? What I'm trying to tell you is that this isn't some kind of conspiracy. It's a normal human attempt to understand what's happening from the elite's point of view. It's a normal human attempt by the elite to protect themselves. Our job isn't to just clap our hands, but to offend, contradict, and ask questions. They're not telling us everything. I would even write that on the side of an airplane. The story with Bill and Hillary Clinton is not just about one family. This is a test of how the American system treats its very important people, VIPs, when they find themselves in a dirty situation. For us Russian speakers, it's also an opportunity to compare. In the USSR, the party boss was never to blame, and in modern America, a top-tier politician is the same. As a rule, they saw nothing. They knew nothing. The scenery, words, and laws change, but human nature, the fear of losing power and reputation, remain the same. And here I have a question for you. When you listen to this testimony, when you see contradictions between the flight logs and the statements, a quick question: whose side are you on? The official version or common sense? Write in the comments what you think. Do you believe that all these people around Epstein knew nothing, and what do you think we're still not being told in this story? If you want Russian-speaking viewers not only to listen to official fairy tales but also to see the real picture, subscribe. And as I've said many times before, hit the bell, and we'll keep digging into what people usually try to cover up. Well, all right. The final conclusion. Formally, everything looks good, but from a common sense perspective, it's clear that something is being left out here, as we've already mentioned. And to be honest, no one was surprised that Bill and Hillary Clinton denied everything. Hillary says, "I've never met him." Bill says, "I've never seen anything." From people of that level and people so used to lying, that's exactly what was expected. Can you really imagine a situation where a former president and a former Secretary of State come forward and say, "Yes, we knew. Yes, we understood. Yes, we turned a blind eye"? What, are they crazy? You can call them anything, but they're not crazy. That would be political suicide, and there would be a one-way legal outcome. But there's one small detail they're reminded of every time they sit at the table, put their hands on the tabletop, and repeat after the clerks. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? That is, in the U.S., lying under oath isn't just a case of embellishing things a little. It's a separate criminal offense to give false testimony to Congress or the court. People with much lower positions than former presidents have actually served time for this. This raises an interesting question. So far, everything they say is based on phrases like "I don't remember," "I didn't know," "I wasn't informed," "I thought it was charity." This is a safe zone. Proving someone definitely remembered and knew is very difficult. But if tomorrow new documents appear, recordings of conversations, testimonies from people in their close circle, security staff, pilots, assistants who say, "Well, he was here, he knew this, he discussed that, yes, he talked to me, yes, I was present," then this whole careful version turns from a political answer into a criminal liability. Because it's one thing to be morally tainted by friendship with Epstein, and quite another to be someone who lied to Congress under oath. The American system, for all its double standards, sometimes responds to this very harshly. That's why today Bill and Hillary are walking a very fine line. They say just as much as they can without crossing into outright lies that can be proven. But if one or two details of their story, "I wasn't there, I didn't see those people, I never met them," if these statements are disproven with documentation, it stops being just a scandal and starts to be called, in other words, an obstruction of justice. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. What exactly gets really interesting? Will the American justice system, as they say, have the courage to bring such charges against people who have been part of the establishment for decades? Or will the system once again pretend that nothing serious happened? Go home, Mr. President, Miss Secretary of State. We don't know the answer yet, but we do know for sure that the more facts become public, flight logs, photographs, witness testimonies, the less room people like that have to maneuver between "I don't remember" and "I lied under oath." Why him? Yeah, and not them. There's a fundamental difference. Trump was actually charged with real criminal cases, while for the Clintons it's still just political and legal defense so far. Donald Trump was charged with a dozen criminal offenses at different levels, from falsifying business records in New York. Well, it all turned out to be complete lies, up to the cases about classified documents and attempts to influence the election results in New York. He was convicted on 34 counts of falsifying records. Later, he was exempted from punishment, but the very fact of the conviction remains. At the same time, he was involved in federal cases, classified documents, then January 6th, then pressure on Georgia, that is, regarding Trump. The system moved to direct charges with criminal articles, courts, and verdicts against the Clintons. In the case with Epstein, the situation is different for now. The House of Representatives keeps them within the legal framework of congressional investigations, threats of contempt of Congress, possible minor criminal consequences for failing to appear or refusing to cooperate. They are reminded about the responsibility for lying under oath, where the maximum is up to 5 years, but who would actually give Clinton 5 years? But there have only been a handful of such cases in history, especially against their own. So for now, there aren't any. Please note that I emphasize that there are currently no direct accusations of sexual offenses, crimes, trafficking, or anything like that. The point is, what did you know? What did you know? When did you know it? And are you lying to us right now? The justice system has used its entire arsenal against Trump, from state to federal cases, from financial matters to classified documents, while with the Clintons it is still playing a more delicate game. Come, tell us, are you lying to us? But if you lie outright, then we'll consider perjury. In the cases against Trump, the charges were built specifically as a criminal strategy, to gather charges, create maximum pressure, and pose a real risk of prison. As for the Clintons in the Epstein case, legally, Congress, for now, again, the key word is for now, is going easier. Oh, they might not remember, of course, they might not know, and of course they can rely on their lawyer. They have already written statements under threat of punishment for perjury, and the formula is always the same. I don't recall. I didn't have that information. But what will happen if the Clintons are actually caught in a direct lie? Lying to Congress and in written statements under oath? That's a federal crime. A maximum of 5 years for each count, sometimes up to 8 years in special cases, but for each count it's 5 years. We've already counted 3. Didn't see, didn't know, didn't hear, and so on. In practice, over decades, very few people have actually been held accountable for lying to Congress, and among the political elite, it's just a handful. Formally, the Clintons are at risk, but historical experience shows that elites of this level usually get off with just a scandal, not real prison time. Formally, we have Republicans in power and key positions are held by people with the right party credentials. But that doesn't mean they'll line up tomorrow to put the Clintons in jail. The career bureaucracy remains the same. Half of the Republican establishment is afraid of setting a precedent, of hunting the elite, and there isn't enough evidence for a conviction yet. That's why the system prefers the usual game. Loud hearings, tough questions, and the maximum risk for perjury. But in reality, this is a trial against their old friends. This means that the very swamp layer of the system is alive and working effectively. To put it simply, the elite's self-preservation system works under both Democrats and Republicans. The swamp protects its own, regardless of whether it's the Clintons, some nonsense generals, or major donors. The mechanism is maximum noise, which means minimum real action. And Trump is not one of them. Trump is not one of them. If you look at the story with Clinton and Epstein, it gives the impression that the deep state feels just fine. It survived Obama, Trump, Biden, and it will survive the next cycle too, because its main function is not the truth, but self-preservation. I think we'll need at least 2 presidential terms after Trump to get rid of those who are the real swamp. And for a short time, we'll be almost free from them until a new order comes to the White House and they start building a new system exactly like the one we have now. Or unless we change the current political democracy to something much more effective. In fact, in theory, such a system has already been created, and it's called, strangely, market democracy. But in order to understand what it is, you at least need to read my book, Capitalism 101. The link is in the description below. It's absolutely free. You can find the link below, and besides that, check out the program Roadmap to Freedom, which you will also receive absolutely free after you download the ebook. The English version of the book is sold on Amazon and in many other places, but in Russian you can download it right from here. The description says where to find the book. Starting the next day, you'll begin receiving them daily. These 10-minute videos, you watch something interesting in the morning over coffee. I talk about it, you drink your coffee, and if you smoke, you have a cigarette. Those were wonderful times, but they ended long ago and we went on with our own lives. But we gained some new, interesting experiences. You can even find something in every 10-minute video to share or talk about with friends, kids, coworkers, or even on the phone while you're on your way to work. That's all for today. Just don't forget, please, to ring the bell so the video spreads more effectively. Until next time.